standard revision of the D-Matrix scale is fully described in the book by Lewis M. Terman entitled The Measurement of Intelligence. The examination should begin with tests that are fairly easy in order to give the child confidence before the more difficult tests are reached. In order to make the examination thorough, the subject is given a range of tests between the lowest age level at which he passes all the tests successfully and the highest age level on the scale at which he fails every test. Show me your nose. Show me your eyes. Show me your mouth. Show me your hair. What is this? What is this? What is this?
Light.
What is this?
Sun.
And what is this?
Pencil.
The first two tests were at the 3-year level. This test is at the 5-year level. Now I want you to do something for me. Here's a key. I want you to put it on that chair over there. Then shut the door. Then bring me that box you see over there. Do you understand? Be sure you get it right. Put the key on the chair. Then shut the door. Then bring me the box. This is representative of the 6-year level. There's something wrong with this face. It is not all there. Part of it is left out. Tell me what part is left out.
Your eye.
And what is left out of this face?
The mouth.
And what is left out of this face?
The nose.
And what is left out of this picture?
Arm.
These two tests are at the 7-year level. How many fingers have you on one hand?
5.
How many have you on the other hand?
5.
How many have you on both hands together?
10.
Now listen, I'm going to say over some numbers. And after I'm through, I want you to say exactly as I say them. Now listen and get them just right. 3, 1, 7, 5, 9.
3, 1, 5, 7, 9.
Now listen again and say exactly what I say. 4, 2, 8, 3, 5.
4, 8, 3, 2, 5.
Now listen again and say exactly what I say. 9, 8, 1, 7, 6.
9, 8, 1, 7, 6.
These two tests represent reactions at the 9-year level. You know what a sentence is, of course. A sentence is some words that tell us something. Now I'm going to give you 3 words, and I want you to make me a sentence that has all 3 words in it. The 3 words are boy, river, ball. Now you make me a sentence that has those 3 words in it.
The boys into the river.
Fine. Now make a sentence with these 3 words in it. Work, money, men.
The men work for money.
Fine. Now listen carefully. I'm going to read some numbers, and I want you to say them backwards. For example, if I should say 5, 1, 4, you would say 4, 1, 5. Do you understand?
Yes.
Now remember, be sure to say them backwards. 6, 5, 2, 8.
8, 2, 5, 6.
Fine. ball and field test is scored at 8 years or 12 years, depending upon the child's response. Let us suppose that your baseball has been lost in this round field. You have no idea what part of the field it is in. You don't know what direction it came from, how it got there, or with what force it came. All you know is the ball is lost somewhere in the field. Now I want you to take the pencil and mark out a path to show me how you would hunt for the ball so as to be sure not to miss it. Begin at the gate and show me what path you would take. And if you hadn't found it yet, where would you go next? Fine. This test is at the 14-year level. Now you watch carefully what I do. See, I'll fold this paper this way. And then I'll cut a notch out right here. How many holes will there be when the paper is unfolded? 1. I folded the paper this way and cut out a notch, and there was 1 hole. Now I'm going to fold the paper again and cut out a notch. And how many holes will there be when the paper is unfolded?
4.
I folded the paper this way and cut out a notch, and there was 1 hole. I folded again, and there were 2. Now I'm going to fold the paper again and cut out a notch. And how many holes will there be when the paper is unfolded?
3.
I folded the paper this way and I cut out a notch, and there was 1 hole. I folded again and cut out a notch, and there were 2 holes. I folded again, and there were 4 holes. Now I'm going to fold the paper again and cut out a notch. And how many holes will there be when the paper is unfolded?
6.
I folded the paper this way and cut out a notch, and there was 1 hole. I folded the paper again and cut out a notch, and there were 2 holes. I folded again, and there were 4. Folded again, and there were 8. Now I'm going to fold the paper again and cut out a notch. And how many holes will there be when the paper is unfolded?
16.
I folded the paper this way and cut out a notch, and there was 1 hole. I folded again, and there were 2. I folded again, and there were 4. I folded again, and there were 8. I folded again, and there were 16. Now I'm going to fold the paper again and cut out a notch. And how many holes will there be when the paper is unfolded?
32.
Could you give me a rule by which I could know each time just how many holes there's going to be?
Well, there are 32 boxes and 32 holes.
You have seen a few representative tests.
Trying to get something set up here. Alright, it looks a little bit better. Hey everybody, I'm Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show. I didn't realize that film had sound until about halfway through, so I apologize for that. Maybe you didn't even notice the sprocketed sound in the background of the projector. Anyways, I just had a dumpster delivered, and then this Mac that I use to stream from, I restarted it, and it was like, I'm going to install something new, and it took 40 minutes to do it, and so everything was a little pinched at the beginning, but I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching some films with us. because that's what we do here at AV Geeks, is we watch some 16mm films. So behind me, on the telecine, which is a machine that we use to transfer film to video, and we do it live so that you can watch it. Let's watch a coronet film, Molds and How They Grow. Enjoy.
In an orchard like this one, where fruit is ripe and ready for picking, many peel the ground. These may very quickly begin to discolor and decay. Mold will usually be found on fruit. It's even seen underwater. This mold is one kind of fungus. It's one of the principal causes of decomposition and may be found almost anywhere. This fluffy colony of mold is hanging beneath the surface of the water. Several kinds of molds may be found on clothing, such as this leather jacket. They grow here, using the leather for nourishment. But leather is only one of the things which may furnish nourishment for molds. And there are a great many varieties of molds which take advantage of these different forms of nourishment. Some molds may be found around a kitchen, where food scraps have been left. There are varieties which will quickly grow on overripe fruit. Others thrive best on bread, from which they take food used in growth. But molds cannot grow without favorable conditions. Let's leave a stack of fresh bread out on a shelf to see if we can learn something about the way molds grow. After a few days, the outer slices still look the same. But there is a mold formation on the inner slices. Why does the mold form here in the middle of the stack rather than on the top? We get a clue from the fact that the top piece is hard and dry. A laboratory demonstration may show us if moisture has any effect on the growth of mold. Water is added to one of two slices of bread in glass dishes. The dishes are then set aside on a shelf for a few days. When we return to the bread, we see that the slice to which water was added is much more moldy than the other. Dampness seems to encourage the growth of mold. But is dampness the only condition which affects the growth of molds? Let's do another demonstration. One of the moist slices is placed in a refrigerator. Another is left out on a shelf at room temperature. A third is placed in a warming oven. After 3 days, the bread slices look very different. The one which was left in the refrigerator still seems fresh. There is no visible trace of mold here. The bread which was left at room temperature is moldy, but the slice which was left in the warming oven is covered with mold. So, temperature too seems to have an effect on the growth of mold. Now let's look more closely at the parts of a mold. Even with the unaided eye, we can see colors and shapes. But with a microscope, we begin to see the individual parts more clearly. The base of the mold is made up of individual threads called hyphae. A network of these threads is called a mycelium. When the mold is ready to reproduce, some of the threads of them rise into the air. On the tips of these hyphae, spore balls form. Each spore ball contains thousands of clustered spores. The spores are reproductive cells. When mature, they will scatter into the air. The spores are so light that they may remain suspended in the air for months and travel great distances in the wind. Spores may land and be blown up again and again until they meet conditions favorable for their growth. Every variety of mold produces spores, but each variety has a characteristic shape and color. Each variety produces spores which may grow and form a new colony. Beginning with a microscopic speck like this one, a network of mycelium develops. We'll watch with a time-lapse camera. The colony expands in every direction. Some hyphae rise up and form spore clusters. The mold grows and reproduces. Now that we know something about the conditions under which molds grow and something about their structure, let's prepare a mold culture and watch. First, we need a medium to nourish the mold. We'll use rice. Then we need some spores, which we can take from this moldy bread. Finally, we need a place where the rice grains can stay warm and moist. With a time-lapse camera, we can watch the mold growing on the rice. Let's watch again. First, the spores grow out to form the interwoven mycelium. Then, as the mold matures, upright hyphae with spore clusters appear. The mold has taken nourishment from the rice, has grown, and reproduced. We can also use a medium of agar on which to raise molds. Again, with the time-lapse camera, we can watch as the mold spreads out over the medium. Once more, and with the stages of growth and the parts of the mold's anatomy: hypha, mycelium, spore ball, spore. We can also prepare a culture on a slide. Here we see a single mold spore as it begins growth. Hyphae begin interweaving to form the mycelium. In a side view, we can see some hyphae begin to rise up. The tips of these hyphae develop and become spore clusters. On a single hypha, we can see the development of individual spores. In almost any part of the world, mold spores begin growth whenever they reach a favorable environment. Some of these molds are harmful. Many are helpful to man. The effects of these molds suggest still further chapters in the story of molds and how they grow.
Tune in again for the next exciting chapter of molds and how they grow. Yeah. So somebody said agar as opposed to agar. Should I add that to the list of weird pronunciations? Think about it while we watch this fascinating NASA short about freeze warnings.
Most of us take it for granted that there'll be fresh fruit in the stores all winter long. But citrus growers often have trouble getting oranges and grapefruits to our supermarkets during the cold season. In the past few years, fruit growers have spent millions of dollars trying to save their crops from winter freezes. These oil heaters are used for freeze protection. Crews can set them up early in the evening, and flames will warm the orange or grapefruit groves until morning. Many nights during the winter, Florida growers are faced with the decision whether to call out standby freeze protection crews at a cost of about $36,000 per hour, or to risk having crops ruined by an unexpected freeze. But now, NASA, the University of Florida, and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, are developing a system to warn growers about freezing temperatures, using a computerized and more accurate means of forecasting the freeze line. Information from the GOES-1 weather satellite is received at the Ruskin National Weather Service station just east of Tampa Bay and relayed around the state, alerting growers when and where to protect their groves.
We collect up to 3 hours of data from the key stations, and at 8 p.m. we enter that data into the computer. At that time we will have our 8 p.m. satellite scene in the computer. It takes a few minutes to type the data in, and from that point on it's very fast. The computer takes over and produces the maps. So by about 8:30 in the evening we can have our predicted maps for the rest of the evening.
Okay, Jim, here's the key station data for this hour.
Okay.
Soil temperatures, 55.3, 52.7, 51.3. Air temperatures, 55.2, 56.3, 57.8. Dew point is 35. This is the O2Z picture.
Yes.
Looks like we've got mid-40s in central Florida. Perhaps some near freezing temperatures in north central. Let's blow this area up at north central.
Okay.
Yes, that's the area. Yeah, it looks like there are some temperatures right at 32 up in north central Florida.
That correlates real closely with the reports we've received from growers.
Florida has certain cloud patterns that make it conducive to satellite weather predictions.
A normal severe freeze for Florida produces a very dry air mass over the state, which eliminates any cloud cover. And this is one thing that makes the system work well in Florida. When we have very, very cold temperatures, we do not have clouds obscuring the satellite data. It gives us a very clear picture of the state using the satellite scenes.
Oil heaters, computers, and satellites, working together to help citrus growers bring an abundance of winter fruit to our supermarkets.
That intro rocks, and somebody in the comments said it was made by Dolphin Productions. And I'm wondering if they used that really awesome analog video computer called the Scanimate to do it. Scanimate was these giant walls of cables and video stuff, and it would basically, you'd have a camera that would have a black and white image, and then you could do things to animate it. It was used a lot in electric company. It was used a lot in like the beginnings of different TV shows. And at one point, somebody, I guess in West Virginia or somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, said, "Hey, I have one of these. I'm looking for a home for it." And I was like, wow, that would be really fascinating. I would love to get that. And then I realized what a horrible idea that would be, because it would take up so much space, and I would have to spend so much time to figure out how to get it up and running and to do these effects. And I already got a thing. I already got a bunch of equipment, that I'm always dealing with and maintaining. So I passed on it. I'm sure it went to somebody else, because there's a couple of collectors who have those Scanimate systems. Look it up. It's kind of cool. So, part of a complete breakfast. I, a couple of weeks ago, did a thing on found footage festivals, their Saturday morning cartoon show, where we talked about the monster cereals. And I have been kind of dubbed or knighted as their vintage cereal expert. I think just because I'm 10 years older than them, and I ate a lot of breakfast cereal, children's breakfast cereal. So one of the things that was kind of talked about was part of a complete breakfast. And so, you see that with most commercials for children's cereal, where it's like, the cartoon, whatever does whatever. Then you see the bowl of cereal, and it says part of a complete breakfast. And it shows bowl of cereal. It shows a couple of pieces of toast. It shows like orange juice and maybe a thing of milk. And basically it's saying that cereal alone is not going to do it. You need these other things, even though it's fortified. So where did that come from? Because it seemed like all of the cereal companies were doing that. It was the Cereal Institute that came up with that. And this film, it's beat up. I got it on eBay, but I desperately want to try to find another copy of this, because it's pretty amazing. It basically talks about that in the studies that they did to basically say that cereal, cold cereal in the morning, can be a complete breakfast if you augment it. So here's Better Breakfast USA. A little bit of start time here before it gets started.
We are studying about good health and the right food. The class was pleased when I told them that one of our health projects was to be a field trip to a television station where they're producing a program about nutrition. Many of the class had never seen a TV studio, so the program
The story of good foods made from cereal grains begins on the farm. Barley, one of the earliest known grains, grows mainly in the temperate regions. The United States produces about half the world's corn crop, principally in the Corn Belt states. Oats are grown in many states throughout the country. Rice is grown on coastal plains, deltas, and river basins in tropical and temperate regions. There are many different kinds of wheat, and it is raised in a wide area. Abundant, wholesome grains are grown and harvested through hard work, modern machines, and skill of farmers. After harvesting, cereal grains are weighed, graded, cleaned, and stored at grain elevators. Then they're shipped to the cereal processing plants. Cereal grains are constantly checked for quality, purity, and uniformity. Every stage in processing, packaging, and distribution of breakfast cereals is carefully controlled to maintain high quality and freshness. Cereals are flaked, granulated, puffed, shredded, and rolled. This makes the good grain flavors available in their most convenient form, appetizing breakfast cereals that taste good. Scientifically controlled processing based on research helps to retain the food values of grains. Whether whole grain, enriched, or restored, breakfast cereals provide a wide variety of nutrients. Test kitchens in cereal plants are staffed with home economists who constantly develop and test recipes, find new consumer uses, and prepare descriptive literature. They are the homemaker's representative. All hot and ready-to-eat cereal packages are properly filled and sealed to ensure fresh flavor and wholesomeness. The cereal industry has a packaging code. Ingredients, nutrition information, and net weight are clearly stated on all packages. Cereals are carefully packaged and shipped to be sure they reach the consumer in factory-fresh form. Whole grain, enriched, or restored breakfast cereals are included in one of the 4 necessary food groups recommended by government nutrition experts in a daily food guide. It's easy to combine foods from several essential food groups into a good basic breakfast of fruit or juice, and a glass of milk. Could a good breakfast make a difference in your feelings, your actions, schoolwork? Scientific experiments were conducted at a medical college in an effort to find the answers to these and other questions. 3 scientific tests were given over a 10-week period, twice a week, always between 11 a.m. and noon. For purposes of comparison, the students being tested omitted breakfast for 5 weeks, and for the next 5 weeks, they ate good breakfasts. Reaction time, time to make up your mind, was tested to determine how fast a correct decision could be made. Steadiness or neuromuscular tremor was measured. Work output was checked as the student rode at maximum effort for 1 minute. Results of these tests show that it's smart to eat breakfast, for when breakfast was omitted, the students took longer to make decisions, were less steady, and work output was less. The cereal and milk serving contributes complete protein together with essential vitamins and minerals. Whether you want to gain or lose weight, or stay the same, eating an adequate breakfast is important. The research proved scientifically that when you eat a good breakfast, you're more likely during the late morning hours to work and play better, to be sharper in your thinking and action. You'll be calmer and steadier, and have more fun and enjoyment every day. Good breakfast habits aid you in getting higher grades. Here's a basic cereal and milk breakfast. It gives you about 1/4 of the food needed for the whole day. Fruit or juice, cereal, milk, bread and butter is a good basic breakfast. And for variety, eggs, breakfast meats, or other foods may be added. A good breakfast is a wise choice for the whole family. It gets everyone off to a good start each day. Well, that's our health and nutrition television program, Better Breakfasts USA.
Our field trip gave us valuable health and nutrition information. As a result of our trip, the class put on its own Better Breakfast campaign for the whole school. The students formed committees, and everyone had a job. One group gave short talks to the other classes on the value of a good breakfast. Some students did research on the meaning of restored, enriched, and whole grains. Another committee conducted a survey in the school lunchroom, asking questions about breakfast habits. One of the students showed a film strip about the Iowa breakfast studies from our film strip library. It demonstrated that when you eat a good breakfast, you are sharper in your thinking and action, calmer and steadier, and work better, especially in the late morning hours. A bulletin board exhibit prepared by the class helped us review the story of cereal grains, which I'm happy to say is also being reviewed every morning personally. Yes, good health begins with good nutrition. Good nutrition begins with a better breakfast. And cereals are part of a better breakfast.
It's fascinating. I would love to at some point do some sort of research project or work with somebody on a research project about the Cereal Institute. I have a couple of films from them, including a Mr. Wizard episode where Mr. Wizard uses magnets to look at the iron content of some cereal. And it's just kind of fascinating. Because children's cereal wasn't a thing until the 50s, and Sugar Crisp was one of the first examples of that. One of the first big examples. I think Maypo started marketing to children, but as far as the big rollout, Sugar Crisp was. And I've did a show with Found Footage Festival about Sugar Bear, the evolution of Sugar Bear and Sugar Crisp and all that stuff. Anyways, let's learn about banking in action.
Some people said America great. Others, vitality.
A third group holds out for know-how. And still others point to a dynamic capacity for change. All of these qualities, imagination, vitality, know-how, and a dynamic capacity for change, are found in abundance in the American system of modern commercial banking. This system consists of state and national banks, both of which are privately owned and operated, working side by side. This dual banking system of ours marked its first centennial in 1963, 100 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the National Currency Act. The 1863 law first permitted the establishment of banks which received their charters from the United States federal government. Of course, banks which received their charters from the states had existed in this country ever since the states themselves, going all the way back to the days of the American Revolution. To some people, banks are where they save their money. To others, where checks are paid, or where consumer credit loans are obtained. Banks purchase municipal bonds, which provide funds to build roads, schools and hospitals, and other vital installations for local governments. Local communities are also aided by the personal services of individual bank officers who contribute their time and knowledge and quite often the facilities of their banks to promote community service projects. Banks lend money for construction, manufacturing, mining, and processing. Both in war and during peacetime, banks sell savings bonds for the United States government and perform the service without charge either to the government or to the purchaser of the savings bonds. Banks lend money to service industries, which are often big business, and to retail stores, which are often small business. Practically all children see banks as the place where Daddy keeps his money safe, and also where they keep their own. Bank customers are farmers needing seed and equipment to increase productivity, or financing to carry them through to harvest time. Bank customers are businessmen seeking housing development loans. Or young marrieds who need a larger home. Bank customers are manufacturers seeking loans to purchase newer, more productive equipment. Banks are used by truckers desiring larger, more profitable rigs to carry bigger payloads at less cost. Bank officers with substantial backgrounds in finance contribute their experience for the benefit of the community in rehabilitation projects, for example. And in industrial areas, experienced bank personnel know their local problems equally well. The financial future of thousands of Americans is secure because of the careful handling of family finances and trust funds set up for that purpose. While bankers work constantly to expand their range of services to the public, internal improvements are always in the works to speed up handling mountains of paper, shorten the time lapse necessary to clear checks, improve the accuracy of monthly statements while getting them out to the customer faster, and free bank personnel for other kinds of banking work. Just as bank services and method times, likewise the buildings banks occupy have evolved to accommodate their customers and to keep in step with new and different bank services. Some banks have even become works of art, inside and out. And banks have often been both the focus and the stimulus for community redevelopment, as in the case of the massive rebuilding of the Wall Street Financial District in New York City. Service projects are in the banking tradition of community responsibility that has its origins deep in America's past. The place, Frederick, Maryland. The time, July 9, 1864. As Confederate troops marched on Washington under the leadership of Lieutenant General Jubal A. Early, they passed through Frederick. In order to finance their campaign, the troops levied a ransom of $200,000 on the town. In an extraordinary session, the aldermen and common council adopted a resolution requesting the town's 5 banks to furnish the $200,000, and to do so, to quote the exact wording of the resolution, quote, prorated according to their several capitals, unquote. The banks responded quickly to the call, and within a few hours' time, they provided the ransom money. The ransom was paid by notes issued in the names of the individual banks, which was the general banking practice of the times. But the days were numbered for currency backed by individual banks. At the time the National Currency Act was signed, on February 25, 1863, there were more than 10,000 different varieties of paper money, many of which were discounted in value when exchanged for gold, silver, or usable merchandise. Although the President's signing of the bill went virtually unnoticed by the newspapers of the day, the National Currency Act became one of the most enduring of our foundations. Up until that time, the banks in this nation were state banks, many of which had a proud history of service which could be traced all the way back to Revolutionary days. Then, as now, state banks received their charters to operate in accordance with the various banking laws, and their operations were supervised by specially designated state authorities. One of the major effects of the National Currency Act was to broaden the foundations of our banking system. By establishing a new system of federally chartered banks, and by creating the office of the controller of the currency within the Treasury Department for the purpose of chartering and supervising these national banks, the Act permitted the many important advantages of our dual commercial banking system, with national and state banks working side by side. Thus, although both state and national banks today are regulated by government agencies, they are privately owned and operated and have remained a strong and vital part of the private enterprise system. Perhaps the most important achievement of the National Currency Act and subsequent legislation was to establish a national currency on a sounder basis. This was accomplished by backing the new national bank notes with United States government bonds. A sound currency was especially vital during the years following the Civil War because the nation was expanding westward on credit. With a few dollars in his pocket, a farmer could move west to Nebraska and stake a claim. It cost $15. In 6 months' time, he has made the improvements necessary to maintain the claim. A sod house, a 4-foot well, and 5 to 20 acres of plowed land. Then the farmer goes to the bank and obtains a mortgage on his farm. Money in hand, he purchases a horse, a plow, machinery and a wagon, harness and equipment to harvest his crop. Then, back at the bank, he borrows money on his crop in advance to purchase seed. On the frontier, an adventuresome people demanded equally adventuresome bankers whose belief in the future often exceeded the limits of reality. But the farmers were settled in the West, and they were there to stay. Agriculture and mining in the West expanded rapidly, but the cost of shipping goods long distances to market was virtually prohibitive. Before 1850, only one railroad line had been completed between the Tidewater and the great interior of the country. Aided by investment and commercial banks, which purchased more than $1 billion in railroad equipment bonds and provided millions more in short-term loans, a 35-year period of growth in American railroading began. By the turn of the century, 200,000 miles of track had been welded into an efficient, coordinated system. The massive projects leading to the development of heavy industry gradually eased America from an agricultural economy toward an industrial economy. And along with this increasing industrialization, it became clear that we also needed a new type of banking institution to cope with our new credit needs. We needed a central bank. In 1913, 50 years after the passage of the National Currency Act, the Federal Reserve System was formed. Today, it includes 12 Federal Reserve banks which operate exclusively in the public interest, a central governing board in Washington, and thousands of member banks which together represent 85% of our total banking assets. The Federal Reserve banks issue most of the currency we use. They serve as bankers both for the government and for private commercial banks. And they also influenced the lending and investment policies of commercial banks by utilizing a variety of economic tools which are available to the Federal Reserve System. The American banking system was further strengthened when Congress established the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to insure bank accounts up to $10,000. The premiums for this insurance are paid for by the banks. The FDIC, like other national and state agencies, also conducts rigorous examinations of its member banks. In the years just before World War I, the automobile industry became concentrated in Detroit, partly because of the foresight of the local banks and their willingness to extend financing to the fast-growing youngster. Increased competition, combined with the growing number of cars, required independent dealers to go to commercial banks to finance their inventories. Later on, banks became major suppliers of consumer credit. In turn, this led to the other forms of consumer financing, which identify the greatly expanded range of personal services in these modern department stores of finance. During the period from 1863 to 1963, our commercial banking system successfully adapted itself to the changing needs of our dynamic economic system. The predictions that were made 100 years ago have generally been far too conservative. Nobody can predict what the American scene will look like 100 years from today. But we can be sure of this central fact. The American commercial banking system will be a part of that scene. Bankers will be meeting the credit needs of our nation during the next 100 years, regardless of the changes this new century may bring.
Thank you, American Banker Association. That little montage of the couple, it was I love stuff like that. That kind of 60s montage of this is what we do in our lives, and see how banking interfaces with that. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. I actually have a conference call with Encyclopedia Britannica, like right now-ish, that I need to go to. So if you like what you saw, buy me some coffee. We love coffee. Go to avgeeks.com and hit the thumbs up or the like button or something. Say that you like what we do. Sometimes it helps. Caffeine and seeing that people like us. Those are the things that we like. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Take care.